All right. Here we are with another Lightning Ventures founder interview. All right. And we have had a hot streak here because we have had a number of super smart people. Okay. Besides yours truly here, we've had a number of super smart people, which Mr. David Young is no exception to that. He is incredibly talented. He is a co-founder of Joyent. We're going to chat about that briefly, although he probably doesn't want to, but I got a couple of questions. I was just going to have him maybe recount a story or two from his days there. And we're talking about the earliest of sort of thought leaders and people who were around when cloud computing was born. Okay, that's
That's right.
it's a very important thing to remember here. Now, David's a young guy, I mean, he's 24, 25 years old.
That's right.
So it's not his first rodeo. And why are we doing this opportunity? You're thinking, oh my gosh, I didn't get this in the Lightning Ventures Syndicate if you invest on a deal by deal basis. And that's because we were unable to run a syndicate and secure an allocation for his company, Federated.Computer. All right. We were lucky enough to invest through our fund, but it's not always that you can always secure an allocation for investors on that deal by deal basis. It's not that David didn't want to leverage the greater power of our band of misfit all-stars. It's just that
That's right.
the round was full. And it wasn't really necessary, but he was willing to let us take a small flyer. And I wanted to get something in the archives here to showcase his amazing company and what he's doing. So that's just what we're going to do here today. So, David, how are you and where are you in the world?
Well, thanks, Mike. I feel like my mom gave that introduction. It was so complimentary, and I appreciate it. Um, I'm doing great. I mean, 2022 was a good year. I love building new things when the whole world is falling apart. It seems like there's a lot less distraction, a lot less FOMO. And as you said, I've done a few different startups, but I'm really excited about this opportunity. We're really happy to have Lightning Ventures involved with Federated.Computer. Um, I'm here in Colorado Springs in the Front Range of Colorado, just about an hour south of Denver, Colorado. The rest of the team is in different places. We've got my co-founder is down in Florida, in Central Florida, and then we have a couple other people in Norway that are working on the project at this point.
So, a lot of people struggle with open source companies and
Yes,
for-profit companies. And
yes.
Joyent is really a good example of what was, I don't know, hundreds of millions, I'm not exactly sure, of an exit, okay, that used and supported open source technology, okay, and was a very profitable Silicon Valley darling. So can you chat about that?
Yeah, so Joyent was ultimately sold to Samsung, as you say, for hundreds of millions of dollars. I think it's public knowledge, just around $500 million. And I'm very proud of that exit because, as you say, it's a difficult thing to sort of build a for-profit business on top of open source. I'm a very big believer in open source, and why is that? Well, I think you have to be very pro customers, and especially in enterprise software and enterprise platforms, allowing customers to have full transparency into your products, the product vision, how the product's being developed, and doing that out in the open is something that's very important for customers. And it's always been a sort of corporate hero of mine. This company that is sort of going through the washer right now, Southwest Airlines. They had a really bad Christmas with the weather and some of the other things, but Southwest Airlines really taught me, and it's something that I've always valued, that the customer has to be part of your conversation, and it's a very difficult thing to do when you go in the old style way, sort of sit down as a product manager or product planning, talk to the customer about what you want, what they want, and then you go into a black box and you build that product, and then you come back to them and you see how much of a product fit there is. And that was really how old Silicon Valley worked. But in the cloud, when we started doing the cloud in Joyent, as you mentioned, Joyent was a company I founded. And it was really the first public cloud there was. It was the first place that you could go on the internet before Amazon Web Services, before Google Cloud, before all these guys, and in a web browser, order up a data center. Well, that business model really empowered all sorts of people to start building amazing products. And we had products like, Facebook Developer Program, Twitter, Tumblr, all sorts of amazing Web 2.0 companies that were built on top of it. And people were innovating really, really fast. And that was exciting for the customer. We would sometimes have, no joke, mothers of entrepreneurs call us up saying, look, little Johnny's app is going to the moon. I only have this platinum American Express. We're probably going to run out of credit. Can you guys sort of extend us some credit while we run around Sand Hill Road trying to raise some money so we can pay the bills? So that was really the speed that the cloud was growing at. And look, there's no way for our engineering team to keep up with that. It's just going too fast. And so having an open source first company really made a lot of business sense. It gave customers what they wanted. And I would also say that the cloud and sort of the more interconnected world allowed for us to have a real-time, viable, valuable conversations with our customers. And so it really worked out for us. And we were really happy to do things like produce things like Node.js, which was really a framework and a way of doing software development, just-in-time JavaScript that really took over the internet. But we also did our own operating system, SmartOS. We had our own storage system, Manta. We did this is not known, but we had a lot of failures too in open source. We had something called Slingshot, which was sort of an Electrum predecessor, where you could take a web page and embed it into a fat application that would run on a desktop computer or a mobile device. So, all these things were possible because of open source. And open source allowed us to build a very valuable business that now underpins all the mobile development that happens at Samsung. So I'm really, really proud of the team that worked there and the success that we had at Joyent.
Okay, so wow, that is super impressive. My gosh. And people talk about the open source dilemma, and that just refutes every single argument. So before we get into file systems and connecting to data networks and all of that fun stuff, so Joyent did a bunch of different things that are really worth noting. And you had some funding from Peter Thiel in the early days, and you utilized, this is brilliant, a crowdfunding type of model where your fans, your super users, everyone out there could pay X amount more for a lifetime access or XYZ access. Okay. Now we see a lot of this catch up with you, 10 or so years later, right? You have crowdfunding, Kickstarters and Indiegogos, all these sort of platforms. The Radiohead album, it's free, pay what you wish. They ended up making more than they would have from their last record. All these kind of radical ideas that came after you. You guys did this first, and you actually purposely avoided venture funding. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because, as you say, we offered these packages to customers where they could buy different things, and we were very, I think, inventive as far as lifetime memberships. Another time we'll have to talk about, when it came to the value of those lifetime memberships, the lawyers have all sorts of things to tell us about that. But we had lifetime memberships. We had things like Players Club, where If a company came to us and agreed to give us their data, we would give them free hosting. And, I'm very open about that because, there was a model at the time where data was very valuable. And we could actually turn and begin to build tools for customers so that they could understand their customers. Now, I have to say, and I hope we'll talk about this in a little bit, I've sort of come to see the two-edged sword aspect of data on the internet and how it can be used for our customers, but also how it can be used against customers. But these are the sorts of things that we explored at Joyent. These were early days, and we're talking, just from a time frame standpoint, around 2000, 2002, where, everything's up for grabs and we're exploring all these different models. It wasn't that we were opposed to VC, Mike, so much, but we were very intent on finding ways to connect with our customers. And this is something, again, that I learned from Southwest. We wanted to make our customers part of our story and part of our success. So as Joyent was successful, we wanted our customers to be able to share in that success. And open source was definitely a big part of it. But also, we had conferences, we had, other sorts of get-togethers, Taco Tuesdays, all sorts of things where customers could really engage with Joyent on many, many different levels. Now, as you say, these things are sort of commonplace today. But back then, that wasn't the case. If you went to Oracle, if you went to Adobe, if you went to some big enterprise software company, it was very formal, very sort of constrained in the way that you could interface with that company. And we wanted something completely upside down, some way that you could get access to all levels of Joyent, either participating, being a customer, being an investor, etc.
So last thing about the team here, and then we'll get into Federated. So it's you, and I believe it's a co-founder role, and that's Shane Stakem, if I'm saying that right. Okay, you two were both together at Joyent, and it looks like he went on to manage worldwide data centers for JP Morgan. So it's true that you guys both work together at Joyent.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. And that's one thing that's very important, and a very important thing to learn if you're learning about angel investing, and if you're learning about early
if
stage.
I could just interrupt you, I think this is something I, as an entrepreneur, always insist on. This is something I think can be learned from other creative industries like film and music, where you find that teams that have done successful films in the past that have created amazing orchestras or albums or things like that, they're on the same wavelength. And so when you start to jam and you start to think, hey, what if we had XYZ, whatever the crazy idea is, then it's not just sitting in my head, it goes to Shane's head, it goes to Derek's head, it goes to the other people. And we have experience with each other, and therefore we have sort of mutual trust and confidence so that I can take my ideas out to them, and they're not going to just sort of tell me how stupid it is. And by the way, I've been on, it's tough hiring people into these sorts of families because people will say, well, those ideas are stupid, but we're not on the same wavelength. And then consequently, from a management standpoint, yeah, I'm the CEO, I'm the boss, I guess, but it doesn't work that way. I'm just really a co-collaborator in this sort of process to take a big idea and chip away the extraneous parts so we can get down to something that's going to be very, very successful. And so part of that process is to take, sometimes very straightforward feedback and honest sort of, that's a stupid idea. So again, if you don't have the trust and the sort of experience with people, that's a difficult thing to do. And you see this, I think this is one of the secrets of Silicon Valley, sort of broadly speaking, is that people, the successful teams, whether it's the Ciscos of the world or the Decks, the Compacts, I'm going really way back because these are not just the PayPal mafias, the Facebook mafias, and all this. This has sort of been a core organizing principle of the Valley. And by the Valley, I don't necessarily mean that place today because it's really spread throughout the world. but this has been an organizing principle of how you sort of build and back really good teams. And as an entrepreneur, this is sort of, I don't know how else to work. When I've tried to go and do it with other people, it hasn't been nearly as successful.
All right, so that's some early stage investing lessons from Mr. David Young. Okay, so if you're a solo founder,
investor, but I'm glad to hear you've had the same experience.
That's in the first couple chapters of the book. All right, so they worked together at Joyent and took a little break, took a sabbatical, and tell us about Federated.Computer. How did the idea come up? What are you solving for? Go through it. Let's hear it.
Yeah, so in my experience, the best ideas come from solving a problem that really we have ourselves and that we need to solve for ourselves. And so Joyent came from the problem that it was just too damn difficult to set up a data center. And by data center, just you had to procure all the hardware, all the licenses, all the different things. Why can't we sort of solve this on a fractional basis? And that was the genesis of cloud computing. As I said, when I came to Federated, I've become sort of frustrated over the past, I would say, 4, 5, 6 years over the fact that all of my attention and data is being used against me by the large centralized services. And I was thinking like, well, how could I build a product for myself that would be of equal or better capabilities from all the different centralized services? And by centralized services, I mean things like email, calendar, files, your CRM software, your video software, all the different pieces of software that we use today, but are really run by big centralized organizations that are not just looking at delivering a great product to us, but how they can leverage our use of the product and our data in the product, either for advertising or other purposes that are not necessarily customer friendly. So that was the original idea behind Federated, was to deliver a suite of software that would not be based on ripping someone's privacy, someone's data, someone's attention away from them. But there was a problem, and that was not everyone is capable of running their own server. So we had to solve the problem of how do we allow ourselves to be sysadmins for them, which is what you get from software as a service. You get the sysadmin, you get all the convenience of all that sort of IT infrastructure, and it's hidden away from you. How could we deliver that to people in a distributed point-to-point way? So as other investors have described Federated, I like this. In a way, we're really building a next generation distributed point-to-point cloud. The same sorts of tools and services that we delivered at Joyent, but now fully distributed so that people can have freedom from being monitored and surveilled, but have the power and the convenience that they get from software as a service today. Now, why do customers want this? Well, they're going to care about the privacy, but I think it's better for them. I think it's 10x, 15x better for them in a number of ways. First of all, economically, it's going to be a lot better for them. When you run a cloud, you really aren't able to give people the sort of economic value that you think you can. Yes, it's convenient, but if you do apples to apples comparisons between the price of centralized SaaS services versus running it yourself is always cheaper overall. But then there's also the question of flexibility. It's very difficult in a SaaS service to provide sort of extreme amounts of flexibility to the customer. And now in the sort of new world that we see 10, 15 years on, more and more customers are very comfortable extending and developing sort of the flexibility on top of their basic core software. And so this is something that they get in a flexible point-to-point distributed cloud that Federated is offering to people. So we think there's also the flexibility. So it's financially better for them. It's more flexible. But then the third thing that I always like to talk about is they then get to choose what are the parts and the people that they connect with. And what does that mean? Well, the obvious example of this is with email today. Do you know that if you send a email to an outlook.com address and it doesn't come from an approved address, it's summarily rejected by Microsoft? So more and more, the internet is becoming balkanized, where big corporations, and I'm not talking about privacy and security, I'm talking about balkanization, where big corporations are beginning to slice up the internet into different pieces. And this really removes from people the power that we all sort of expect to get from this open, transparent platform. And a point-to-point cloud, and that's what Federated is building, gives people back control over who they get to interact with. And I think this is also very, very powerful.
So you're starting with the productivity suites.
That's right.
Said. So how does this work? Because, Google Docs and all these things that we use, the calendar stuff, they work. So they work.
They work. Okay. Yeah, they work. So, they're great.
How do you then build something that gives like a 10x experience or something different for them to use?
Well, the 10x experience is not going to come from necessarily the functionality in a calendar. Although, we are offering things like built-in Calendly functionality, other sorts of things like that. But the 10x experience is going to come from, it's going to be more financially viable for them. So instead of charging $12 per user, for $25 a month, a small business can bring 25, 50 of their employees onto the platform. So it's 10x more valuable financially. It's more flexible. It's a lot more flexible. Rather than waiting to see what Google's going to give you, you get to cook your own food. You get to sort of add your own pieces to the puzzle, either yourself or through third parties, without having to go through the Google constricted point. And then, as I said, now with the third piece is you get tons of flexibility. So one of the things I'm really, really excited about is the fact that we're building in Bitcoin and Lightning functionality throughout the productivity stack. Now think about that, Mike. You just will never, ever get that from Google. I mean, I think I'm making a pretty good assumption there. They just have no incentive to give you that sort of functionality. But if you agree that Lightning and Bitcoin are the future of not just exchange of value, but also the way that we exchange identity, the way that we exchange lots of other sorts of things like security, certifications as far as what people can do. These are all things that the Lightning Network is capable of doing. And by the way, I'm not going into explaining what Bitcoin is or what the Lightning Network is. I assume that a lot of your audience is going to be aware of that. But this sort of functionality combined with, in the first instance, workplace software is just sort of, for me, a mind-blowing expansion of what people can do with these very, germane sort of day-to-day tools, and it completely transforms them.
So, what's the popular saying? The cloud is just somebody else's computer.
That's right.
How does this work? Where, when you think of these big data hosting facilities, that's how it works. Do you want to talk about how this is different than that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it doesn't mean that in the federated model, we don't keep you from using, say, a Linode or a DigitalOcean or one of the hundreds and hundreds of other sort of cloud, I like to call them fractional computing services out there. You can run federated on one of those. You can run federated on a Xeon server that you bought off of eBay, or you can run federated through one of the partners that we'll have at launch. So you really get to choose the sort of hardware model that is best suited for you and your business. And you can be fully sovereign and get away from the fractional clouds altogether. or, go bit by bit. Maybe you're not completely ready to, run a server at your business. You get the choice.
So for the people that do want to go bit by bit, how does that process look for them? What type of technical expertise is needed for that individual?
Yeah, so the design of the product, and we hope to launch the product at the end of Q1 this quarter. The design of the product is such that it really the only technical expertise that's required to use the product is just to be able to use all the different pieces of the product. Our product comes completely ready to run with scripts that bring you and help you migrate off of Google, off of Microsoft, Office 365, and the other popular services that you might be using out there. We do all the configuration for you on your client side. So whether you're using Mac OS or Windows or Linux, whether you're using iOS or Android, Federated Tools will do all the configuration for you. And then we sit and if you give us permission, we sit and watch the health of your installation. Now, we never get access to your data. This is something that this sort of fine-grained permission, we take advantage of the Lightning server to engineer the ability to sort of get the access so that we can make sure that your system is running well, and that we're proactive about it, that it's backed up, so that if you have a problem, we just reinstall, rework things so that you're back up and running in a matter of minutes or an hour or so. So it's very easy for the users. You're not required to go down to the command line and do different configuration files. Our product is engineered so that it's very transparent to the user, such that my mom or your mom or someone that doesn't really care about the fine parts of the command line, they don't have to worry about that. If they want to get to it, it's there, especially if they're running on their own hardware. But we have a model where we provide people with a service that is completely sovereign for them, but is running without any IT knowledge.
So we're definitely going to get into the difference between things like Start9 and Impervious. We're gonna definitely get into that. But let's first go to get this from 0 to 1, to get this out, your first customers for go-to-market. Is that on the enterprise level? Who do you target first? How do you get your first clients with a beta release?
Yeah, so this is a little bit of our sort of inside secret sauce at Federated, but the thing is, we're going to be going after customers that are interested in data sovereignty, want to get off, the Googles and the Apples and those sorts of services because of the reasons that I've described. They think they're overpaying, they're not getting enough independence, and they like to have a little bit more control over their infrastructure. And there's just a bunch of different groups out there that are interested in these sorts of things across a wide spectrum of sort of adjacent interests. And so that's where we're going to be going for our initial customers. We already have a number of customers that are using the product today, initial versions of the product. And we have these customers using the product so that we can get a very good understanding of the different components in the product and what their sort of feedback on those components and whether we had chosen the right components to stitch them together for the completed product that we'll be delivering this quarter. As we go forward, we have sort of the opportunity to build channels into different communities that begin to use the product. The product will be entirely open source. Everything about the product will be open source. So, parts of our product will be able to run on companies like Start9, so they could be a partner. Other parts of the product, like our configurator for the FAT clients on iOS and Android and things, will be able to work with other backends like Umbrel, for example. So if you're running, parts of what appear on Umbrel as a server today, you would be able to use the federated front end to configure your front end devices to run with that Umbrel. And I think that's not a problem. I mean, in my opinion, the opportunities for getting people off these centralized blood-sucking services is so tremendous that all of us are going to win as we work together. And this was my experience in the early days of the cloud, especially open sourcing it, where we worked with our, sometimes our competition, but we all were sort of evangelizing an idea that you needed to be able to get off of running your own fleet of servers in order to be successful. The early days of the cloud were very difficult. I remember going in to companies that later would become big users of the cloud and being told by their CTOs and CIOs, I will never fucking get, I'm sorry, I hope I can be saucy in my language, but I am never fucking going to get off of the cloud. Get off of my servers and get onto the cloud. That will never, ever happen. And those are, customers like banks and other things, and are now big proponents of the cloud. And I think the same is going to be true for software as a service. A lot of customers are very used to sort of give a credit card and forget it, and hopefully it just runs. But as you mentioned, there are a number of very cool companies that are arising. Federated is one of them. Umbrel has had tremendous success, Start9 as well. And I think all of us are sort of approaching this with slightly different flavors and ways of giving customer value, but we can all work together to sort of build this opportunity for the self-sovereign, take back control movement that I see is really growing among customers.
So on a percentage basis, when you take something like, I don't know, OnlyFans, Patreon, whatever, okay,
Yeah.
if they move to Federated's plan, what do they lose? And approximately on a percentage basis, if it's possible, can you ballpark the actual dollars and cents savings to them?
Yeah, so just in general, if we're just talking about the workplace solutions, so say they're a customer of Office 365 or Google Workplace today, those enterprise solutions cost about $12 per customer per month. We estimate that the same solution is going to be available on Federated for about $1 per customer $1 per named user per month. Now, that's a little bit of an estimate, but because we don't exactly work the same way. They work by login, we work by resource. So if you have 100 employees at your office and only 2 of them are big users, well, it's all in. It's unlimited, in fact. As long as you have enough storage and RAM and the rest of it, we don't care. You can have 1,000 people there and we don't care. You just go at it. And that's the way it should be. That's customer friendly. Whereas the other model, which is the model that we're up against today, says no, for every named user on Google Workplace, it's $12 a month. And so, people don't get users or they don't do other sorts of things. And that's not the case with Federated. So what do they give up? Well, I mean, in my opinion, they're giving up nothing. These are all internet standards that have been around for a long time, and we support these standards. Email is email. We support the email. We support you get a VPN, you get all these sorts of things that you get. And in fact, more things than you get from Google. You get, video, you get a Slack solution or a Microsoft Teams solution type thing in there. You get, as I mentioned, a VPN. So these are all bundled into the server, and a lot more over time, more will be put into this. And then, in the future, when we open this up to third-party developers, even more will be available. And the business model is, as I said, flat rate pricing so that people just sort of get a really good value economically. But, Mike, that's only part of the solution. And frankly, in my experience, I've been around this industry long enough that sort of going to people with just a economic reason is never enough because people want to be safe. So the thing that's really exciting about this is now for the first time, I get to have sovereignty over this whole stack, and I get sovereignty. So there's opportunity. There's tremendous opportunity from a economic company value system that I get to begin to do stuff with my data that I couldn't do before if I'm on Google. I mean, go to Google today and try and download your data. It's impossible. They say they'll download it for you, but it takes days and weeks, let alone allowing your data to be interchangeable with all the other stuff you want to do in your business. So that's really opening up all sorts of new doors to companies and to businesses and to people that do not exist on software as a service today. And then, as I said, the third pillar of the federated model, and it's also what the Umbrals of the world are talking about, and the Start9s, is I can now connect with other customers, other people out there in ways that make sense to me rather than ways that make sense to Google. You know, Google, if I'm a Google customer, Google decides who I get to connect with through their software as a service. But in the federated model, we get to decide with our customers how we interconnect. And I think that's going to be, just like we've seen in the Bitcoin Lightning space, that sort of self-sovereignty over data and how we interconnect with data is going to be very, very powerful. It is early days. And these are sorts of things where, just like we're seeing with the Lightning network, is like, well, geez, I always had to go to a bank. I always had to go through a credit card processor. I'm not used to thinking about this stuff, but people will begin to think about it. This has been my experience. This was my experience with the cloud. They'll say, holy shit, now I've got control. These are the things I can begin to do with that control. And I think that's going to be very, very exciting.
So I have a Start9 embassy here in my house, the old one. I need to get the new machine in here, but that requires a physical piece of hardware. It's a physical device that's on. I can barely maintain it myself, but I do have one. So how does your solution differ than that, in the fact that you're not actually selling kind of hardware, or is it a dedicated device? Can you talk about that?
So you would be able to deploy federated in the Start9 model. If you wanted to use your own hardware, we will recommend to you some things, but you could also, when signing up for federated, just say, well, put it on a federated approved cloud. So deploy it to DigitalOcean or 1984 hosting in Iceland if you don't want to be subject to Five Eyes and all the three-letter agencies, scoping out the different sorts of email conversations you're having. So you get the flexibility in the federated model to decide how you want to deploy federated. You can have it as a piece of hardware in your house or not. You can have it as a piece of hardware at a third-party consultant that's going to sell you that service. Those are all options. We don't really care. What we want is for people to have a system that gives them control again over all this data and make that super, super successful for them. And what is success? Success for me is if the federated solution works and acts in a convenient, easy to use, no sort of hassle, no drama solution, just like your software as a service. We want it to be that simple. And if it's not that simple, then we've failed. And in fact, we're proposing that we're going to be even more simple. So if you are running on Linux, you will run a piece of software when we launch, and it will auto-configure all the services on Linux so it just works with your federated system, wherever that system's working. And the same is true for Windows, Mac OS, iOS, and Android. So, it really, truly, you don't have to know about the port numbers to set up your Thunderbird email, all that sort of stuff. It just works. And that's the power of SaaS, isn't it, Mike? Is that it just works, it's convenient, but we're giving that to people now with sovereignty and helping them to be sovereign and understand, but then make it easy for them to be able to adopt these self-sovereign tools. I think, and this is my experience and my sort of opinions, but some of the other self-sovereign projects that are out there like Bitcoin and Lightning, these have tremendous potential, but where they're, I don't want to say falling down, but the opportunities for us today is to make them super simple for people to adopt, but also keep them sovereign. So we want to have self-custody, to speak the Bitcoin Lightning terminology. We want to have that for our data and our privacy, but we don't want to make it so that someday you say, oh, fuck, I lost all my email. I lost all my files. Oops. Well, I guess I just got to do better. No, that's not a good enough solution for me. And I think we have enough technology and expertise to be able to provide a better solution for customers. Did that answer your question?
No, it created about 30 more, but so when I hear things like DigitalOcean, how is that safe? How do they not have access to the data? If I'm doing this easy breezy SaaS type of setup where it just works and it just configures it, right? And I just tell it what I do and it just makes it work. Okay, if that instance is being run in a DigitalOcean somewhere, how am I safe from that?
You're not. I'm not going to claim that you are. But that's a choice that you get to make, not Microsoft, not Google. You get to make that choice. What DigitalOcean will represent to you is a convenience of a machine. But let me tell you, if I'm running a server at home, I'm also not safe, because guess who's looking at the data going over the pipes going in and out of my home? It's the ISP. I was very much schooled on this reality. We had, as I said, at Joyent, we had Twitter as an early customer. Twitter started on Joyent, and we helped them move into Canada. And early versions of Twitter were going out to customers over the web with a banner ad at the top of the browser that was being injected at the Ethernet frame level by Rogers, the ISP. So your ISP is watching you. Your ISP has complete sovereignty over our systems. And that's where, you need to start to use things like VPNs and other sorts of things. But then once you have the VPNs in, if you're not talking to someone that's also using a federated or equally secure system, then if you start emailing someone with an @Gmail account, then Google starts to get that data at least. So our self-sovereignty is a matter of degree. It's not absolute today. Hopefully over time, we will claw back more and more of this privacy and this sovereignty. But this is a project that's going to require a number of steps. And as I said, part of that is just let's first get control of the base server, whether it's on DigitalOcean or 1984, or it's on a recycled server that I bought on eBay that's running in my basement. These are all good solutions to start. And then over time, we can begin to take more and more control. Now, I will say that all the data in a federated system sits on the disk encrypted, but I'm smart enough and have enough experience to know that if someone else can get access to that encrypted data, they can ultimately get access to the data. But I don't think that that's something that DigitalOcean's doing today. But you're right to raise the question.
So wouldn't this be a perfect complementary product for Start 9 to Package? I mean,
Absolutely.
what I'm getting out of, I already got the damn thing running here. Okay.
Yeah,
if I'm using yeah.
That could be a great partnership for both of us is, and I think this is something that Federated is going to be very interested in doing, is finding hardware and on-premise hardware solution partners. But that's not our sort of core expertise.
Well, they're racing to package all these other things, right? People want the doc editors. People want all of these things, and it just seems to make sense. That's pretty exciting. Okay, so I don't have any. Let's do
a roll up. I guess we'll have to do a roll up there, right?
What do you mean? Roll up what?
Start 9 and Federated.
I hope so. My actual dream is to be able to get you Cloaked Wireless and Start9 all together on something. But
and thanks for bringing up Cloaked Wireless, because more and more today, our wireless lives and what we do on our mobile devices are really, really important. And I'm very, very interested to know about Cloaked Wireless. I've been a longtime user of the Graphene OS project, and it's a really good project. It's a really good start. It doesn't solve all the problems to have sort of a self-sovereign mobile solution today, but you're raising a very important point, which is mobile is a very important part of this whole puzzle. Absolutely.
So, and finally, one more thing on the competitors. If you had to name one that's out there, but you know, a lot of people would have the question right now: how is this different from Impervious? So, what can you say on some of your plans and long-term plans compared to with what Impervious is set out to do right now with their downloadable browser? I don't know if you played with it yet.
I have played with it. I think it's very interesting. I think I would just have sort of a philosophical difference as far as approach. Everything doesn't have to be peer-to-peer, or our idea of peer-to-peer, we don't have to reinvent all the different sort of protocol stacks to achieve what I think Impervious is trying to achieve. Having said that, I have no problem with us having a multitude of different approaches, because look, we are a lot of little armies, a lot of little Lilliputians trying to rope Gulliver down, if you know what I mean. And the Gullivers of the world are the Apples, the Googles, the Facebooks, the big guys that have everything centralized. They're in complete control. So every enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so Impervious, Umbral, Start9, there are a lot of different folks out there working on these problems. They're all my friends, and I hope we can all figure out ways to work together and go to market together. And it would be a real shame for us ever to turn our fire on each other. And I'm not just saying that for self-interest. I think it's in all of our self-interest, from my own experience, that we build the idea of self-sovereignty, point-to-point, encrypted, all these things, so that we bring power back to the people, away from these centralization sort of big behemoths that need to be put in their place. And it's a big opportunity for us as well. And, you know, I wish Impervious, you know, all the best.
All right, so I think we're going to leave it there. In closing, look, you're in stealth mode. Okay, nobody's talked about the fundraise. There's been no press. Everything that's on your website is very early. Things are very quiet over there in stealth mode. And you sent me a 26-page document, and you said read this, and I did on a flight, and it's a lot to take in. I don't believe that's on your website. But so what's next? When can people expect to see more? Do you have kind of a roadmap timeline over the next 30, 90, 120 days?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. We plan to be launching Federated to a limited group of people this quarter, and we will start to see how things go. And we have a waiting list that we have of people that want to get access to the product, and then we're going to sort of roll out slow, see how things are going, and then go from there. But I think that 2023 is going to be a really big year for Federated, for Umbral, for Start9, for Impervious, for all of us that are working on sort of bringing back control to the edge of the network, away from the centralized big forces. And, you know, so stay tuned. Federated.Computer is our URL. As you say, we just sort of have a filler site there. We're going to have a lot of fun with the launch of our product. We've got some really cool things, and it's one of the things that I have a track record at Joyent, is having fun with customers. And I think we'll do the same thing at Federated. Hopefully customers respond to it. I think they will. And, you know, I'm just really excited about what the future holds this year.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. David Young. That's Federated.Computer Cloud Productivity Suite without surveillance. Federated.Computer. All right, man. Well, thanks for hanging with us, and we appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. Adios.
Bye, buddy.